All right, so we're almost finished here. The very last thing I did was I merged all my background together into a single layer, and then I trimmed the edges with the postcard underneath. And then I see little things that I can stretch. Here, let's crop it. This will help save some memory. But the reason I want you to have an internal border is so that you can check the edges of your poster, so that nothing funky is happening right at the edge. And I want the kind of index card edges, like the little rounded edges of the card and the slight drop shadow underneath. So I'm trying to incorporate that. All right, so now when I take this and I transform it, thought I had lined that edge up. I guess not. So let me build up all my elements. There we go. I'm going to take my index card, take all of this actually, transform it just so that edge lines up behind. What is this one? There we go. Oh, I see why it has to be the way it is. Yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, so I've used halftone dots and color separation in my spot illustration. That will help it print with some more complexity besides just flat color. I used this big texture I brought in of spot illustration, or of halftone dots as kind of a gradation. And honestly, I'm not sure about it. So I might use it at just a lower opacity. Keep it very subtle. But I like what it does down here. Right. And I like what it does across the top. So next I have to ask myself, is there anything more I can do? These are the different background options I have. I'll make 2 folders. And background 2 I put on top of background 1 to modify it, right? But this is without background 2. And I liked it, but I feel like it takes away a little bit from the text in the spot illustration. So I simplified it. I kind of brought its contrast down towards the middle. And that will print better. And yet, when you look at it, it will actually have more that pays off, in the textures and in the content. And that's what I think is the benefit of digital art. But you do want to check your edges. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take both backgrounds, select them, hold down Option and say Layer, Merge Layers, and get one finished background that's merged. And then from that, I want to cut out the index card, the original index card. So let me turn these off just so you can see what I'm talking about. So there's the original index card. I want to select the empty space. I might even want to modify it a little bit. Oh, I should have added that in. So I'm selecting the empty space. And this is how important edges are. I scanned this index card, I think at 1200 pixels per inch. So I got all the little hairs. That's what's fun about taking your own photos or scanning your own textures. A quote I like is that artists have the arrogance to take their own ideas seriously. So you can take your own index card seriously, your own tissue paper. You can scan the inside of a candy bar wrapper and use that as the basis of a poster background. Because you know compositing skills, you can do anything you want with the pixels you select. And you can turn them into something new. All right, welcome. So when you're working on something with this many layers and at this high resolution, you want to look closely. And I'm going for this kind of handmade paper edge. It'd be a whole lot easier to just select a rectangle, right? But I have to look at it carefully to get the selection I want, because that's what's going to cut out from my background. And then down that edge looks pretty good. Little nicks I can live with.
I can't figure out when I put my background layer in why I still have a couple of white spots that I cannot fill in inside my lettering.
All right, we will look at that. Do you have any layer styles on it?
Yeah.
So they might be automatically generated from a stroke. So we can look at that. So now that I've selected the empty space, I'm going to add in this top column. And I'm going to subtract all that from my merged background layer. Just like so. And then I can check that by having different fills, a white fill behind, a black fill behind, a gray fill behind. And then you can really see your poster edge. So that's why I want you to all have a border so you can really treat that edge, right? And just like a spot illustration, that edge should make sense and be clear on different backgrounds. And if you need to modify it, I have it in one merged layer now where I can modify it without too much difficulty. But I think for my purposes, what I'm going to do is use the white background and then actually use the full layer behind. And then there's just one little part of this index card I need to clean up. There it is. And then I'm good. All right, and then you can do your final crop. You can bring your border pretty close, but try to make it fairly equal on all sides. And then we'll check to make it print ready. And then I can come around and help you guys out. All right, so this is my finished poster, and then I have to think what is it going to look like if I print it on our largest paper. So I'm going to save it quick. It's 1.84 gigabytes. It has a lot of different smart layers and vectors and textures in there. And for my print ready file, I'm not going to want any of those extraneous layers, but for my working Photoshop file, I want to keep them. They're the different options I might play with. So we'll let it say. So I've designed this really complicated background with doodles and an index card and rough edges, but I think it looks good and it's done. What if you wanted to go more simply and you just wanted a flat color background? Well, let me just take my gray background, for instance, and move it up above everything. Okay. Up above everything. And then instead of gray, let's change that to, I don't know, a Christmassy color. Maybe a unsaturated green. And let's say you loved that. You loved it even more when you put a gradient overlay on it. And you stretched it out, and you played with the opacity, and you did it at a weird angle, whatever it is that you liked. But the problem is, if you print just a straight flat color like this, that's a ton of ink in a photo printer, and it will print a lot darker than you think. So one way I recommend that you break it up, whether it has a gradient on it or not, but especially if it doesn't have a gradient on it, is to do this. Make a duplicate of your flat background. And I'll turn the gradient on my duplicate. And then go to Filter, Filter Gallery. Now the only filter we've used is Gaussian Blur. We use that quite a bit because it softens edges, makes something out of focus. But this filter gallery is full of kind of cheesy built-in effects. But the one that I really like is under Sketch. And it's called Halftone Pattern. And if you really push your contrast up pretty high, I'm actually trying to get these nice dots, and you push your size pretty high, you're going to get this very straightforward 90-degree angle kind of grid. But then if you use it to modify your flat color with things like screen mode, it's going to mute the color a little bit, but give you the same kind of effect, and it will print a whole lot better. So you can use screen mode, you can use any of the lightning modes. And then what I actually like to do is do screen and then add a little stroke around the individual dots. So those are different ways you can modify just a flat, pretty basic background. And even if it's just a flat color, you can see how that might be a little bit more interesting without having to output the actions. All right, so how do you submit? I've got my finished poster. You want to make sure its size is right. So you go to image size, you make sure it fits within 17